ठीक है, सही बात है। Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ziaur Rahman. I am working as assistant professor at PPOS, Pakistan Institute of Prosthetics and Orthotic Sciences, and also representing ISPO Pakistan, which is the national member society of ISPO International. I welcome you all to the online series of lectures on research methodology and how to conduct research projects, session 2. This series of lectures are exclusively designed for students and young professionals. The idea behind this initiative is to enhance the research skills of students and young professionals. Today, our speaker is Dr. Aamir Abbas. Dr. Aamir Abbas is a young epidemiologist of our country. He worked as a faculty member at Aga Khan University, Karachi. Currently, he is working as assistant professor at Khyber Medical University, Institute of Medical Sciences, Kohat, Pakistan. Presently, he is doing his master in healthcare analytics and IT and information technology from Carnegie University, Pittsburgh, United States of America. He has 15 publications to his credit. He has spoken in more than 2 dozen occasions through different organizations as a research trainer. Today, he will be talking about study design. All the audience are encouraged to ask questions during the sessions. At the end of this course, uh, the audience will be awarded a certificate for attending this course. So everyone is encouraged to ask questions through comments box. So without further delay, I would like to ask Dr. Aamir Abbas to proceed the session. Over to Dr. Aamir Abbas Saab.
Okay, thank you, Zia, for this introduction. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can hear, sir.
Okay. First of all, Assalamu alaikum to everybody, and good morning from my side. And I think this is night in Pakistan, so good morning, good evening, and good night, depending on where you are currently. What I will do for the time being to start the session, I'm going to adjust my screen and going to show some slides which we'll be using for this particular session. And as I'm adjusting my screen, I have to remind you of a few facts. And these sessions are needed to be in continuity to each other. Let me just put my mobile phone on complete silence. And these sessions are required to be in continuity to each other. So I will encourage you people to, if you haven't seen the last session, please go to my YouTube channel and see my last session. In addition to that, the real value of the online sessions lies in the interaction with the audience. Otherwise, it will not make any sense. If we are organizing this live audience, we are coming online in a synchronized form, which means that there is a registration process and there is a platform which we are using, and there is a lot of work which is going on behind the scene, thanks to Zia and his team. The main essence of that, the main objective is that to enhance interactivity and to listen to you people, what you people think. Having said that, please interact with me. I have to emphasize that during the session, if I'm talking and you are just listening, then there is no need for an online session, right? I just can record a session and just upload it. That's easier for me and that's easier for you. And I think what I'm trying to emphasize over here is the main reason we are organizing these sessions in a synchronized form, in an online form, in a form of a live stream, is that we want to encourage interaction between those who are seeing these sessions. So the topic for today's discussion is study design. And those who are online, I would request you people to say something in the chat box so that I can know that you can hear me clearly and you can see me clearly. Anything, as some people are saying hello. So I want to keep the discussion bilateral. So I know that I'm really talking to people. I want to listen to you, because when you talk to me, I get to know that what you are thinking, and that gives me a very specific direction, very specific guidance to me as well, that how I should be teaching you people. Today's session is about study design, and we are going to divide this session into two parts. We're going to, I do not expect this session to be very, comprehensive, that I will cover everything related to study design. I'm going to talk about some aspects of the study design today, and I'm going to talk about subsequent aspects which are left in another session, and we'll continue this discussion. So, the way I'm asking you people to comment, or if you have any question or if you have any comment, I want to, this is the way I will interact with you people. Whoever is commenting, I will show their comment on the screen, and if it is a question or a comment on which I need to respond, uh, I will give you, or I will show that on the screen, and I will read it to everybody, and then we can take out the discussion. And that's extremely good that people are also talking about good evening, Team Pakistan. Yes, and so there are some cricket fans also online over here. So let's go to our session, and this is going to be the outline of this session. We are going to be talking about very few things today. Okay, we are not going to be talking about a lot of things today. First of all, I'm going to walk you through the objectives of this session. Um, the last session was related to research question, and I commented on that session. During that session, I'm going to link that session with the study design session. So there we are going to pick up the words in the stem of the research question and identify what study design implications they have. And then we are only going to talk about the classification of study design. So we are not going to be talking about a lot of other things related to study design. Uh, like we are not going to be explaining each individual study design in this session. For example, I'm not going to be talking to you people what is a case control study, what is the difference between a case control study and a cohort study or a cross-section study. That is something which we will be talking in the subsequent sessions. So I will move forward with the objectives actually. So the objectives of this session are, we will identify the keywords in, what we will do, we'll identify keywords in research question that link research question to study design. And this is very important because we spend a lot of time in telling you people that how to make a research question, and each individual word in the stem of the research question has its own importance. Therefore, I will let you know that which keywords in the stem of the research question are linked to study design. We'll talk about the classification of study design. And then this is something which we'll not talk about in this session. And that is, we'll leave it for the subsequent session. In the subsequent section, we will explain what is a case report, case series, cross-sectional study, case control study, cohort study, and randomized control trial. Okay, so these are the objectives. Let's talk about, so what we said, that research question has some ingredients that has study design implications. Okay, therefore, what key terms within the stem of the research question guide the study design? And I'm anticipating that this may be a very short session, but I just want to make sure that you get these points. So these are the key terms which you need to identify in the stem of the research question that will have some study design implication. So the situation can be if there is no study, and if there is, the term is association, causation, effectiveness, or if you want to combine different studies. So if there is no study, what will you do? Okay, for example, taking our time backwards, let's assume if we go to a time that we are talking about smoking and lung cancer, there's no study being done. What happened at that time, right? Somebody in their clinics found out a relationship between smoking and lung cancer. So they found that thing out. And obviously there was no research question, but they reported as that finding in the form of a case report, if it was one case, or case series in the form of, if it was a combination of cases. And as I'm talking, giving the example of smoking lung cancer, we'll be talking about more about what a case report and case series is in the subsequent sessions. But if you have the term of association within the stem of your research question, right? So how would that work? Just a minute. Okay, right. If you are talking about an association, right, uh, which means that you did a case report or case series and you generated a question that is there an association between smoking and lung cancer? I mean, the patient presenting to tertiary care hospitals. Then the study design option you have, that is cross-section study and the case control study, right? Which means uh, the association can establish. I mean, if we do a cross-section study and a case control study, it can establish association, but it cannot establish causality, and it cannot rule out reverse causality. Now, this is very important. What do I mean by this? I'm trying to explain it over here. And if I'm not able to clarify the concept, please ask me in the comments, because if this is not clear at this point in time, you need to understand it over here. And I'm going to use my screen to try to explain it. For example, if I'm saying that this is S is smoking, and let's say this is lung cancer, right? And I want to check the association between smoking and lung cancer. But I'm trying to imply over here that smoking leads to lung cancer, that the relationship is this, right? But if we established association, then that is one of the possibility. And another possibility is that somehow people started to got lung cancer, they became hopeless from their life, they started to smoke a lot, and therefore uh, they resulted in and they resulted in all the risky attitudes, which means that the lung cancer resulted in smoking, which so this one is known as causation, and the bottom one is known as reverse causality, which we are talking about over here, right? uh, so whenever there is an association, there are two possibilities: either that results in causation or that result in reverse causality. So we are not sure. We are not sure about the causal mechanism, or I mean the causality of the things. Uh, I at this point in time, I want to take a moment and I want to pause over here. I want to I'm inviting comments from you people to understand whether you people understood that when I say that when you establish association, right, that means two things: either the exposure leads to the outcome or the outcome leads to the exposure. The first of the two means that there is a causal relationship between the two, and the second possibility means that there is a reverse causality, which means that association does not establish causality. You need to establish causality through a different study design. If you have causation in your stem of research question, we are going to talk about that subsequently. But having said that, if that is not clear, please let me know in the comments. And if there are no comments for the time being, I will assume that this is clear. And I will move further. And if there are comments later on as well, I'm happy to respond to that as well. Now, if the term in the stem of the research question is causation, then this is how typically the question will be phrased: does smoking causes lung cancer among patients presenting to tertiary care hospital in Karachi? The study design option which we have is cohort study. So if you have the term causation in the stem of the research question, the emphasis is that you are limited to study design, which is the cohort study. That's one thing. So now what we are saying that there is smoking and there is lung cancer, and we are asking the question that, okay, just smoking causes lung cancer. And that is quite straightforward. That does not involve any element of reverse causality. That is not very complicated. That's very simple. And you only have the cohort study as a option in study design, right? So there is a question. There are a couple of comments. For that, I will pause in for a minute and let me readjust my screen for a minute and then show them over here. And so the question is that, and that's a very important question, is so the question, I will first read the question: why can't we rule out reverse causality? That's a very important question. And I said that when we do, so I'm going to go back to my slides where I left actually, right? And uh, just give me a minute to like go back to the slides where it was talking about uh, the phenomena which we were questioning about. And let me pull those slides once again for you. Okay, right. So as I said to you that if if we have the word association in the stem of the research question, right, then we have two study design option, which is cross-sectional study or the case control study. As I'm going to explain to you, I will not be able to answer this question completely, but you will be able, I will try to do that a bit. But part of the answer will lies in the fact when I'm explaining this different study design, that what is a case control study, what is a cross-sectional study, what is a cohort study, right? But what happens over here, that smoking, I'm saying that there is an association between smoking and lung cancer, right? So if there is an association, right, what does that mean? That either smoking caused the lung cancer or there is a possibility of reverse causality, that is uh, lung cancer give rise to smoking. Now the question, and that's a very intelligent question, is that why we cannot rule out reverse causality? That's because of the inherent effect of the these study designs, which is cross-section study or the case control study. And the way it works is when we're doing a cross-section study, so we take so if we are talking about the disease as being the case control, for example, lung cancer as the disease positive and the disease negative, right? And smokers as disease positive and disease negative. Bear me because it's very hard for me to write on the screen, but this is so you take the information all at once, which means that you do not establish the fact that smoking preceded the lung cancer, right? For to establish the causality, right? To establish that smoking caused the lung cancer, you need to establish that smoking occurred before the occurrence of lung cancer. But what happens in the form when you are using the cross-section study or the case control study, you are not able to establish the fact that smoking preceded the lung cancer. This particular fact we known as temporality. While having said that, when we move towards the cohort study, what happens in the cohort study, that you are establishing that smoking occurred before the lung cancer. Therefore, you are able to establish temporality. I mean, temporality comes out to be a very important factor in establishing causality. I think I do not expect you to be very uh, to understand this point at this moment. I will request you to please follow us in the subsequent session when we are trying to tease out the difference between a cohort study and the case control study, and then I will revisit this concept if you remind me. And if it is still not clear, you can ask this question again. There are a couple of there are a few more comments. So what is exposure and outcome, sir? Smoking is the exposure and lung cancer is the outcome in the examples which we are studying. Okay. Then, so I didn't say only cohort study. If you followed me completely, I said that if your STEM, I'm going to go to that slide where I've mentioned it actually. I didn't only talked about the case controls, this thing, the uh, cohort study. I talked about if you use association in the stem of the research question, then you will go for cross-sectional study or case control study. But if you use causation in the stem of the research question, then you go for cohort study, right? So this is, let me see other comments or questions which are coming up over here. And it can be a case control study. I mean, it depends on this, how you are asking the question. If you are asking the question of association, then you can use cross-section study or a case control study. But if your research question is asking the term of causation, if you're asking causation between smoking and lung cancer, then you have to go for a cohort study. Okay. So there's a comment. I think the person was satisfied by the response. I'm glad to hear that. So I was not satisfied because this needs a bit more explanation. Uh, so let's move to this point. Okay. So what we said, that we talked about the fact when there is no study being done, when when there is an association, so the study design option becomes um, case control study and the cross section study and causation. Then you have um, cohort study as the study design option. Now, if you have the word effectiveness, and I have to I just chose the word effectiveness loosely, but if you have to very precise, then you have to differentiate between efficacy and effectiveness, and you have to be very specific about that. But for the time being, what I'm trying to emphasize over here is this thing. You established causation, you established association, you established causation, then what is the next natural course? For example, you establish the fact that smoking causes lung cancer, right? Now you're going to find a treatment for the lung cancer, right? So you will find out a treatment and you will check whether that particular treatment is efficacious or effective for treating a certain outcome related to lung cancer. And I have one example, and this is by no way going to be complete, but I'm going to talk about this superficially at this point in time. If you have the term effectiveness or efficacy, I'm also going to emphasize you can also have efficacy as well. So if you have any one of these terms, whether the effectiveness or efficacy, then you are going to have randomized control trial or any other interventional study design. It may not be it is not required to be a randomized control trial. It may be a randomized control trial, but it can be any other interventional study design. Then, for example, what we are trying over here in our example, we are taking the intervention of this drug is known as veliparib, and we are asking this question: does adding veliparib to the standard treatment for advanced metastatic squamous non-cell lung cancer, we're becoming very specific about the type of lung cancer we're talking about, is effective in reducing mortality? So what we're using, the term effectiveness. And as I emphasize that you can use the word effectiveness, that has a different meaning. You can use the word efficacy, that is a different meaning. I'm not going to go into the details of that. Maybe in the subsequent sessions I will go into that. Then the study design option which you have is randomized control trial. I'm going to pause once again and to see if there are any questions. Uh, so I think I answered this question as well. Yeah, I think, yeah, I talked about this. So I'm going to go further. And if you have, as a reminder, if you at any point have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments. And then you did a number of randomized control trials, and what you did, you found that some of the studies are showing that the medicine is efficacious or effective, and others are showing that it's not efficacious or effective. For example, just say for the sake of example that you found out that there are 50 studies and 20 of them are saying that the medicine is efficacious or effective, and 30 are showing that they're not efficacious or effective. What do, right? How do you decide whether you to use this medicine or not, right? This is a very tricky question now, right? It's not that you are going to say, okay, it's not democracy that you say that, okay, 30 studies are showing that you are going to use that medicine and 20 are showing that you are not going to use that medicine. It's not the way how it works. So what you are going to do in order to combine the results, you're going to use systematic reviews and meta-analysis and combine all of these studies to give you a particular and that is the point where the guidelines are then formulated, where you combine a lot of studies into systematic reviews and meta-analysis, and let the authors let the practitioners know that now what is the way forward, and that requires a lot of research acumen. So there is another question. As I told you, that at any point you can ask the question. So is effectiveness come under causation and correlation? Now this is so let me I will not be able to answer this question completely because we have been talking about this in a number of sessions. I think and this point deserves a lot of attention. Therefore, I'm planning to release a specific video on my YouTube channel And please wait for that, but very superficially right now. Correlation, association, causation, efficacy, and effectiveness, all of them have their own meaning. That's one thing, right? Now, is effect does effectiveness come under causation and correlation? uh, so I would just say that it very naive and superficial answer to this will be that it doesn't come under correlation. It comes, and it's a specific type of causation, but you are inducing a cause. Like in a cohort study, the causation is not a researcher induced causation, right? But what is happening in this situation? You are giving a drug as a researcher, and that drug is inducing some beneficial effect. Therefore, it's a special type of causation which will induce a beneficial effect in the target population. Uh, so I hope it helped you to clarify the concept a bit. So this is the summary of it, what we are talking about. So there's no prior study. What we'll do, and we didn't talk about it a lot, but like this is also a thing, which means that if there's nothing, there's not even a case report or case series. What happens that a lot of experts come together and they make an opinion about this. And a specific example of this would be a situation when a first few cases of COVID-19 emerged, and then there was not a lot of evidence. So what is the best way to proceed in that? And a lot of experts' opinion, which means the pulmonology, ID consultants, epidemiologists, and other senior experts in the field, they combine together and they make an opinion, and their opinion is an evidence, but it's the lowest level of evidence. I mean, that is not something that it has to be remembered that if you have other levels of evidence, then you have to discard it. You will not go for this unless you do not have anything else. Then there is case report and case series, which you talked about briefly. We're going to talk about them in the subsequent session. Then you have cross-section study, you have case control study, cohort study, randomized control trial, and then systematic review and meta-analysis. Typically, you go in this sequence, at least theoretically. Practically, things may be quite different. So there is another question. So let's see. Sir, if the systematic review is not available in that case, that's a very good question. So let me refer back to the slides where I've talked about this point. Situation is that when there is there is a research question where some of the studies are saying one thing and other studies are saying another thing, and you have to decide what to do. And the question is that at that situation, I tell that you have to do a systematic review or meta-analysis. And the person who is seeing this video from our Facebook group is asking the question that if a systematic review is not available in that, then you do a systematic review, right? That's a very good opportunity. That's a research opportunity, and that's an opportunity to publish. Now, systematic review and meta-analysis are not very easy form of researches, but once you learn them, it's a skill. That's gold. That's pure gold, actually. So that is a particular situation where you or any other researcher will have to do a systematic review and meta-analysis. Simple as that. Another question is there. So kindly explain meta-analysis, systematic reviews, and short word. Very good question. Though it requires a separate session, and we will get over there. But let me explain it very shortly as requested. So what you do, as I told you, that there are different studies. Let's assume there are 50 studies. 20 of them are showing that and the drug is working. 30 are showing the drug is not working. You want to combine them, right? So how do you combine them, right? Systematic review is a systematic. So what happens, right? There are two ways to do it. One of the way is that I go to the internet, I take all of the studies, and I belong to a particular. I feel that this drug works. So what I'm going to do, in case I feel that this drug work, I'm more biased to pick up these 20 studies which says that this drug work. But if my opinion is that this drug doesn't work, then I'm more biased towards picking up the 30 studies which are which are saying that it doesn't work. So so I'm saying there are 50 studies in total, 20 of saying it uh, works, and 30 saying it doesn't work. Not work. Forgive me for a very bad handwriting. I'm sorry. Right. So if I'm inclined to prescribe this drug, so I'm going to pick up this group. And if I'm against, for whatever reason, I have a bias against this medicine for whatever reason, then I'm going to pick up this thing. Now, what systematic review does, it removes the bias. It's a systematic way of acquiring the data, which in this case the data will be individual papers. It's getting the paper, research papers from different search engines, then studying them to analyze the quality of individual papers, and then combining them in a way that is systematic. So a systematic way of collecting the individual papers, combining them, and then analyzing them, and to give an evidence. So what is meta-analysis? In systematic review, you just combine them, but do not statistically combine them, right? You do not, uh, uh, for example, if there is a measure of association associated with your study, or for example, some you do not give one statistical pooled score for that. But in meta-analysis, you combine them in the form of a statistically pooled score. Now, in which situation to do systematic review, which situation to do meta-analysis, this is a whole new world, and I will encourage you people to learn more about it. And inshallah, in the future, we will be organizing sessions specifically focused on these topics. And I'm glad that you people are showing interest in this area as well. I'm happy to see that, and I'm happy to see all the questions, which means that at least to some extent, people are following what I'm saying in this session. So we talked about all of these things. This was a summary, and as again I'm saying that um, please ask any questions if there are still any. I'm going to go to our summary slide. Uh, so just a minute. Let me uh, organize my slides. So this is the summary which we are talking about. We talked about the objectives, we talked about the link between the study design and research question, and now we are going to talk about the classification of the different study designs. Oh, sorry, I thought that I was showing my slides, and it's somehow it's not showing. So let me share my screen once again. I'm sorry for that. It's not actually easy when you have to focus on different windows at the same time. Right. So I told you that we talked about the objectives. We linked this words in the stem of the research question with study design, and now we are going to talk about the classification of different study design. And there is another question I'm going to answer that. Muhammad Kamran is saying that what is the prerequisite of a systematic review? Again, systematic review is a separate, elaborate topic which needs specific time. But very superficial answer to your question is, what do you mean by the prerequisite? Do you mean the author's prerequisite or the situational prerequisite? Right? Authors. There is no. Everybody can do a systematic review if that is your question. So you do not require any qualification or any training. Obviously you need to know how to do a systematic review, but there is no if that is the question that you are asking. But if your question is from a methodological perspective, then there are situations where you need to do systematic review, and I'm going to give you one. I'm going to leave at that. And one particular indication or situation where you are required, or somebody is required to do a systematic review, is that of the example where I told you that there is a situation, there's a research question where different studies are saying different things. And recently, in the last 5 years, no systematic review has been done to combine those results. If on a particular research question or a systematic review has been done in the last 5 years, then you perhaps need to either modify your question or do something else. But if no systematic review has been done in the last 5 years, then that is perhaps the situation where you may be required to do a systematic review. Sir, I'm very much interested for learning more systematic. Please let me know when it's available. Okay, please remain in touch with me, and the way is to subscribe to our YouTube channel and remain connected. We will definitely keep you updated. So going forward, uh, with the classification of the study designs, here, yeah. So this is the classification system which we'll be using. Okay, through this slide, what I'm trying to explain over here is we have just 20 minutes left, and as I've been answering questions in between as well, so I'm a bit short of time. I may be rushing in between, but don't worry. All of this will be repeated in the subsequent session, and questions are more important for me. Even if I have to leave the session in between, that's okay, because you can follow up with that in the subsequent session. But interactivity with the audience is more important. This is the classification system which we'll be using. There are different classification systems. Just remember that thing, that there is not only one classification system. So how does that work? To start it, uh, you just need to answer this question: does investigator assign the exposure? Okay, so is it like, you are the investigator, you are sitting there and you're just observing? That is an observational study where you do not assign the exposure. But if you are an investigator who assigned individuals into a treatment group or a control group or some way, or you gave a treatment to somebody, then that is an experimental study. So the simple question which is required to be asked is that, did investigator assign the exposure? And if the answer to that question is yes, then that is an experimental study design. But if the answer to that question is no, then you are doing an observational study. As simple as that. And this classification system may seem a bit intimidating. I'm going to warn you, it's going to explode quite quickly. But just like follow along and try to try. If you do not understand in the first go, try to visit the recording once again, because it will be there on the channel, and try. But try to understand each and every step as it is increasing. So we talked about till here now in the previous slide. And now from the observational study, which we talked about the fact that you will ask yourself the question, did investigator assign the exposure? And the answer to that question is no. Then you are having an observational study. Then you ask yourself the question, is there a comparison group? And if there is a comparison group, right, then you are talking about analytical studies. And if there is no comparison group, then you're talking about descriptive studies, right? So you have been uh, uh, using these terms for quite a time now, I think. What is a descriptive study? What is an analytical study, right? Therefore, this is the answer to that. If there is a comparison group, then that is an analytical study. And if there is no comparison group, then that's a descriptive study. And within the descriptive study, if the unit of analysis can be either individual data, right, individual patient data, or the unit of analysis can be group, for example, countries, cities, districts, counties, schools, hospitals, then if the unit of analysis is a group data, then we call it as an ecological study. And if the unit of analysis is individual data, we are going to talk about that in the subsequent slide. So let me go uh, revisit what we just said. Okay, but we said that we are going to ask the question, did investigator assign the exposure? And if the answer to that question is yes, then we have the experimental studies. If the answer to that question is no, then we have the observational studies. And then within the observational studies, we are going to ask ourselves the question that, is there a comparison group? And if there is a comparison group, then that is an analytical study. Otherwise, it is a descriptive study. And within the descriptive studies, we are going to ask ourselves the question whether the unit of analysis is individual data or group data. And depending on the answer to that question, it will be if the unit of analysis is a group, for example, cities, countries, hospitals, schools, then it is an ecological study. And don't worry, we will be explaining these concepts in with examples when we are talking about specific study designs. Like we'll talk about case control study, cohort study, randomized control trial, and where each one of them fit into this classification. And we will revisit this classification again and explain it further, inshallah. So further going into the details of it, that we talked about, if the unit of analysis is individual data, okay, then within that classification we are talking about Either you have a case report, you have a case series, and your cross section. Now, what is a case report? What is a case series? What is a cross section study? For this right now, what you need to know, for this, the sake of this session, you need to know where the case report falls in the classification, where the case series falls in the classification, where the cross section study falls in the classification. What is a case report? What is a case series? What is a cross section study? We are going to visit that in the subsequent session. And I'm going to pause over here and to see if there are any questions related to classification of study designs. So far, there are no, and we are going to continue with the discussion. Okay. And then within the analytical studies, there are cross-section studies, case control study, and cohort study. Okay. So you have, what you have is within analytical studies, you have a case control cross-section study, case control study, and a cohort study. Again, in the subsequent session, we'll be talking about the fact that what is a cross-section study, what is a case control study, and what is a cohort study. But one thing you need to remember over here, which may be quite tricky for you, is that the cross-section study is appearing in the descriptive studies and as well as in the analytical studies. Right? Is this a mistake? No, that is by and that is deliberately mentioned because cross-section studies are of two types. Either it is an analytical cross-section study, it's a descriptive cross-section study, or it is an analytical cross-section study, depending on the fact whether there is a control group or there is not a control group. So cross-section study is of two types. Okay, and then everything remains the same over this side of the screen. We explained all of this. The only new addition to this is that we are going to expand on the fact among the experimental studies, which is that the investigator assigned the exposure. And the experimental studies can be of different types. At this point in time, I will just introducing these names to you. Even I'm not explaining what these are. Just remember that they where these study designs are in the classification system, right? Within the experimental study, there can be randomized control trial, there can be quasi-experimental study design, there can be cross-section, crossover study design, factorial study design, stepwise study design, and then the randomized control trial can be simple randomized control trial and cluster randomized control trial. So I understand this may be overwhelming for a lot of people because they might be hearing this for the first time. A lot of terminologies may be heard for the first time, and that's okay to be felt intimidated. And if you do not get it, please ask questions in the comments. If I do not get questions about a particular aspect of my talk in the comments, that means two things. Either I'm communicating too well, exceptionally well, which is obviously not true, or you people are not understanding anything. So so please ask questions if it is not very clear. So there is a question. So there is a question. So what type of study it will be if I compare something with standard, right? So you here need to remember something. I mean, this information is not enough for me to comment or answer on your question, right? What are you comparing for, right? Are you checking for an association or causation or efficacy or effectiveness, right? That will give me the study design. So you need to be specific whether you need to, what are you checking, right? You need to choose one of these terms or other terms which are specifying the scope of the research question, which we talked about in our first session. So define exposure. For example, this is a very simple question. I do not completely get the essence of this question, but exposure is something, for example, we're talking about smoking and lung cancer. So smoking operationally can be called as an exposure. Exposure operationally can be defined as something which is a factor which you think that may be responsible for either increasing the risk of the disease or maybe responsible for causing the disease. That may be a very simplistic explanation, but if you can elaborate on your question, I may be able to give you a very specific answer. Okay. So I think, first of all, let me check if I have any slides left. Then if not, Right. So that was the last slide I had. So we can focus on answering the questions over here. So the fonts used in slides are very small, and may I request you to please share the PowerPoint for better understanding? Sure, inshallah. Uh, uh, yeah, that's a very good question. Okay. Uh, what we are going to do is going to share this presentation. I'm thinking of a mechanism. What you will be required to do, if whosoever wants to get this presentation, they are required to write me an email, right? And I'm going to share my email over here, and they're going to request me, and I'm going to share my presentation with them. And I apologize for the small fonts, and thanks a lot for the feedback. I will try to incorporate this fact in the future as well. And thanks a lot, Sahar, for your feedback. And this is my email address. If somebody wants to note it down, if you need these slides, please write to me, and I will give you these slides. And I think we are uh, finishing this session. I think if there are any questions, we still have approximately 9 minutes left. But I'm intentionally not expanding on other concepts because I understand that it is still overwhelming. Uh, if you have any questions related to study design, then you can ask. Otherwise, if there are no question, uh, then I'm going to give the stage over to the host, that is Ziaur Rahman. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Aamir Abbas, for such informative sessions. I hope our audience have also found these sessions productive and have learned many new things. Thank you, Dr. Saab, for sparing your precious time and making this session happen on our request. We are also thankful to our audience for making these sessions interactive by asking questions. It is highly appreciated. Please drop your comments about today's sessions in the comments box. We would like to know your expectations and we will try to address them. The subsequent session of this series of lecture would be announced through ISPU Pakistan page very soon. For more information, please visit our page and join our WhatsApp group. Take care of yourself and your loved ones and COVID-19 pandemic. Have a great time and Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.